Hello viewers, once again it's me, Ewaenruwa Nomaren, and this is my channel, A Place to Fear God. This is where we learn about God, His beloved Son Jesus Christ, and their kingdom purpose, the three most important subjects that we can ever learn about, talk about, or discuss in the entire Holy Bible, according to John chapter 17 verse 3. The subject that I have prepared for you and myself today is captioned Integrity and its Burden. However, before I get into that, I once again have a tune that some of us might enjoy. And while the tune's playing, if you are interested, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button and also the notification bell so that you can be notified and be the first one to come when we make future uploads. Once again, the subject that I've prepared for you and myself today is captioned Integrity and its Burden. We have probably already heard of the word integrity and most likely already know what it means, because when we were growing up, our teachers, our parents, our guardians, whoever it is, would always tell us, you've got to have integrity and stuff because that is the way of the future and stuff, and that is a requirement to being able to be successful in life. But when it comes to Christianity, people just don't seem able to execute it because they confront all kinds of challenges and they just fall because they don't really have integrity. Though, of course, already being aware of what it is. But in case some of us don't know, integrity is being somebody of principle, meaning you have principles that you're aware of, that you believe in, and you stick to those principles, whether somebody's looking or not, and for all given circumstances. And the reason why integrity isn't a very common principle among Christians is that they don't really know how to relate one thing with another. That's the reason why people don't have integrity, but yet call themselves Christians, because they can't relate things to other things, connect things properly together. And there are examples in the Bible of people who didn't have integrity, and people who did, of course, so that we can learn some few good lessons. A great example of somebody who did not have integrity was Esau, because in Genesis chapter 25, from verses 29 to 34, Esau was coming home from, unfortunately, not having anything to eat. He was hunting and stuff, but he was unlucky that day, and he couldn't really find anything. And then he saw that Jacob was cooking something, pottage as the account says. And then he said, "Can I have this pottage that you are cooking, because I'm hungry, I'm faint, and I just need something to eat desperately." Now, the way Jacob reacted to this has troubled the minds and hearts of many people, because you're like, why would Jacob make an offer to get Esau's birthright? That's wicked. You're being crafty and stuff. We have to understand, somebody who was a man of integrity, unlike Esau, wouldn't have just let that slide. Something that's physically troubling you, like hunger and something, wouldn't make you forget about integrity and then just go and be about the moment, like Esau, because he sold his birthright simply for one morsel of meat, as St. Paul later came to refer to it as. And like I said, though many people think Jacob was wicked, he was actually smart, because when a senior or somebody who is supposed to be of authority is not representing that person, the only thing that people are supposed to do is to take advantage of it, and Jacob was completely aware of this. And not only that, of course, but God was completely on his side, because Rebecca obviously knew from the dream and stuff that Jacob was going to be the younger one, and the older would have to serve the younger, Esau having to serve Jacob. And because Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, all of that ended up fulfilling. And God's prophecy is always fulfilled. If we read Isaiah chapter 14, verse 27, and chapter 55 from verses 8 to 11. It's a very typical story of integrity. And St. Paul later coming to connect the dots of some people who are trying to be pondering of what does this story mean. In Hebrews chapter 12 from verses 15 to 17. Also talking about how that story relates to how we need to purge ourselves of any kind of iniquity in that category, had stated, looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. For you know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. We have to understand, because Esau sold his birthright, he was considered somebody of no integrity. Because somebody of principle, who knows that I have the birthright and I have to keep it, will not let some offer of somebody just become the ideal because of hunger or thirst or whatever the given circumstance at the time may be. Another example of somebody with no integrity was Adam and also Eve, if you want to add her to the story. In Genesis chapter 3 from verses 1 to 6, after Genesis chapter 2 from verses 16 to 17, where God specifically warned Adam that you cannot eat the apple, Satan came to Eve. Remember, he's crafty, of course. He won't come to the man because that was the first person God created, the first person that the idea was sold to. So it would be a lot more complicated. But he went to Eve, convinced her to eat the apple, and then she took it to Adam. If Adam was a man of integrity, him being somebody of principle, like I said, because integrity is being somebody of principle, he would have looked at that situation and followed principle. Not follow Eve because she is his wife or anything, or because the apple suddenly looks good. No, if he were to be a man of principle, principle comes first. And principles were, I can eat anything I want except that fruit, and then the story wouldn't have happened, and therefore mankind wouldn't have been in the position that it is now. But because Adam was somebody of no integrity, he listened to his wife Eve, and then they ate the apple, and then everything else went according to how it went in the account. An example of somebody who was with integrity is God himself, because he's somebody who does not change from his principles. If we read Malachi chapter 3 verse 6, nothing that Satan has done, nothing that any of the people of Satan's children have done, have ever changed him and moved him away from his own principles. He has never thought in his mind, said, oh no, I have to give them sympathy. No, he has always stuck with principles. And that is why he is somebody with an infinite amount of justice. That was how he judged Adam, though they were a creation very special to him in Genesis chapter 3 from verses 16 to 19. That was also why Uzzah in 2 Samuel chapter 6 from verses 1 to 8 was killed by God simply because him not being Levi, when he touched the ark, God said, no, you can't do that. You're not somebody who's been qualified to do that. Like I said, God smote him or he killed him. David was sad about this, but God didn't feel like that because he was a man of principle and didn't enjoy people who were not like that as well, who could not control themselves and be people of principle. But an even bigger dance between somebody who had authority and somebody who didn't was Jesus Christ and Satan, also represented by the people of Genesis chapters 25 and 27, Esau and Jacob. Jesus Christ is a man of integrity, and you could see that both in some of his statements and in some of his decisions. For example, when Jesus Christ had occasion to talk about the reason why he came down to pay the ransom, in John chapter 10, he stated, as the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. John chapter 10, if we read first verse 15, then verse 18, and then finally verse 17. This is integrity, because he knew that this was a mission that he was coming to do, and that he was going to pay the ransom sacrifice, and no temptations, whether it be of the one in Luke chapter 4 and Matthew chapter 4, as they are the same account, or people's opinions, like in Matthew chapter 15 verse 12, when the disciples were afraid for Jesus, like, oh, don't you think that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes are going to be angry from my teaching and stuff? Because Jesus Christ was a man of principle. None of those things even bothered him, and that was why the ransom sacrifice was as successful as how it was. If you also read John chapter 5 verse 30, where Jesus Christ was talking about how he is subject to his Father, and he is somebody of integrity in following that principle, had stated, I can of mine own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not mine own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. See also chapter 4, verse 34, chapter 6, verse 38, chapter 12, in verses 49 and 50, and chapter 14, verse 28. And then there is the other character, Satan the devil, who is the exact opposite of Jesus Christ, because he is not somebody of integrity. If we read Ezekiel chapters 25 to 28, it discussed in detail how King Tyre at the time, but used prophetically for Satan the devil himself, was a man of honor. There are many people that honored him. The people of Bashan, symbolic of people who were strong, mighty, had lots of power, integrity, etc., were with Satan the devil, and they loved him, and Satan the devil was just this big guy in the heavenly realm. However, because he was not a guy of principle, if we read Isaiah chapter 14, from verses 12 to 15, it wasn't statements, but those were the kinds of things that he was feeling in his heart. And what were those things? I want to be like God himself. I want to be the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. I want to rule everybody. And he indeed succeed in the sense that he is the God of this world. If you read 2 Corinthians chapter 4 in verses 3 and 4. Because people who do not have integrity don't go very far, Satan the devil cannot achieve his goals to the extent that he would have wanted to, simply because God said, instead of you being in the heavens of heavens where I am myself, you are going to be in hell, and indeed that hell is going to be very happy to meet you, because you are the belonging that they have always been waiting for. If you read Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9, meaning that people who don't have integrity, like Satan the devil, will never have the blessings that people who have integrity, like Jesus Christ, ended up getting. If you read Hebrews chapter 12, in verses 2 and 3, and Philippians chapter 2, from verses 5 to 11. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the same, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endureth such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest he be wearied and faint in your minds, as that Hebrews chapter 12 and verses 2 and 3 states. It's very important that we keep this in mind. Now, one really important thing that integrity does is it allows us to differentiate between things that are important and things that aren't. But why is this really necessary in a time like this, the last days? This makes God less important, because they can't really put him forward, because they're like, oh, but the things of the world are also very important. People like that are not ones of integrity. And James the Apostle, advising us against this, in James chapter 1 verse 21, had stated, wherefore lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. We should never be like Martha, who preferred to not only cook while Jesus Christ was teaching, but also call somebody who happened to be smarter than her to be listening to Jesus to also join her in the cooking. Apparently justifying her reason by saying that, no, I'm cooking and people need to eat, so my sister Mary should be here. And then she said, Jesus, can you please tell her to come here? But then from verses 40 to 42, Jesus Christ said, no. Mary was the smart one because she took the best part of the whole idea of what was happening. And St. Paul has said that we must do the same if we read that 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 31. However, the title of my video, of course, is Integrity and its Burden. So what is exactly the burden of integrity? Well, because very few people have integrity in these last days, and very few people are righteous, when we ourselves have integrity, there is going to be a lot of persecution. For example, Job's own wife in Job chapter 2 verse 9 had told Job, dost thou retain that integrity, curse God and die. This is his own wife, who is ideally supposed to be a helpmate if read Genesis chapter 2 verse 18, supporting the husband and obeying him if read 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 3 and Ephesians chapter 5 from verses 22 to 24, who is now telling the man, curse God and die. Do not retain that integrity. And his friends' opinions to him were not all that much different. But after hearing all of those things over and over again, Job still stated in Job chapter 27 in verses 2, 4, 5, and 6, as God liveth, who hath taken away my judgment, and the Almighty, who hath vexed my soul, my lips shall not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. God forbid that I should justify you. Till I die, I will not remove mine integrity from me. My righteousness I hold fast, and will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live. Once again, Job chapter 27 in verses 2, 4, 5, and 6. Though there were so many things happening, though he was sick, though his wife was telling him bad stuff, though his friends, as a result of their understanding of the Bible, were not really telling him very beneficial things, Job still told all of those people and himself, I'm going to keep my integrity till I die. And he was considered a righteous person who escheweth evil by God himself in Job chapter 1 verses 1 and 8, because God knew that Job was really somebody of integrity. Another example of somebody who experienced the burden that comes from integrity was David, because David had the opportunity twice to kill Saul, God's anointed, in 1 Samuel chapter 24 from verses 1 to 22 and chapter 26 from verses 1 straight down to verse 25. His men were urging him, just kill this guy, because sometimes they'd be in caves, Saul chasing David, and then they'd have the opportunity to just seize him and kill him, and his men would be like, kill this guy, he's chasing us, he's ruining our lives, and his heart obviously would be telling him the same thing. But because he was a man of integrity, he not only refused to listen to his heart, but told all his men off, and sometimes even took a few pieces of evidence to show Saul that though I myself had the ability to seize your life, kill you, and take over the kingship, or even hand it to Jonathan or anything, I decided not to, because I, unlike you, have integrity. David talking to Saul, of course. Therefore, it's very important that we understand integrity is a good thing. Though there might be a burden with it, we have to sustain it. In Acts chapter 14, verse 22, St. Paul and the other apostles were confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of God. We must try to retain our integrity, not try to invest in reserving God's sorry, like people who have no integrity do. They don't know how to keep principles, but they just want to invest in being able to easily, calmly, and very nicely say to God, sorry, I did not mean it. You know I am dust, as the Israelites would say, Psalms chapter 103, from verses 2 to 5 and verse 14. You know I'm weak, frail, I'm not somebody who can really keep stuff, so please try to, no. Rather, we should invest in having integrity and invest in being able to keep principles, keep instructions, and keep the commandments of God. Once we can do so, the blessings that come from integrity will always come. In Proverbs chapter 20, verse 7, King Solomon himself had stated, "The just man walketh in his integrity. His children are blessed after." In chapter 11, verse 3, King Solomon had also stated, "The integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them." And in Psalms chapter 15, in verses 1 and 2, David the psalmist had stated, "Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? He that walketh uprightly, and worketh righteousness, and speaketh the truth in his heart." We will even be referenced by others. People will see us and be like, "Yes, this guy is a man of integrity." When people want to tempt us, they'll be like, "Nah, forget. He is somebody of integrity, so you better just not even try." Like the king of Ashes, who knew David as a man of integrity. If we read 1 Samuel chapter 29, in verses 6 and 9, and chapter 27 from verses 8 to 12. We will be known by integrity, and we will be saved in the book of life. If we read Revelation chapter 21, verse 27. I hope all of this makes sense to you viewers. If we know ourselves as people who aren't really persons of integrity, then I advise that all of us pray to God to help build our sense of integrity through experiences that we will face. In Hebrews chapter 12, in verses 12 and 13, St. Paul, quoting Isaiah the prophets, Job, and King Solomon, as they had all said similar things, in Isaiah chapter 35, verse 3, Job chapter 4, verse 4, and Proverbs chapter 4, in verses 25, 26, and 27, had stated, "Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed." It is only when we have integrity that the statement of King Solomon in Proverbs chapter 28, verse 18, will fulfill on our own lives, where King Solomon had stated, "Whoso walketh uprightly shall be saved, but he that is perverse in his ways shall fall at once." I believe that the first part of the verse is what we want to fulfill on us, not the second. I hope this helps you viewers understand what integrity means and the burden that it has and the blessings that come from moving through that burden. And I choose to end my talk on the subject, integrity and its burden. To conclude this episode, we are once again going to hear a tune that some of us might enjoy. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something most importantly. Please try to subscribe and click the notification bell if you haven't already to be notified when we make future uploads. Thank you for listening.